Boys don't become men simply by getting older. They must be shown the way. They must be initiated into manhood by other men. They need brothers. The world may be collapsing, but God is raising up good men to raise good men. It's one of the great God movements of our time, and you can be part of it. On the Dragon Slayers podcast, we interview ordinary men with extraordinary tales of conquering their fears and becoming fearless, loving men of God. Through their stories, you will hear rich wisdom, practical advice, and the value of brotherhood so you can stand out as a man among men. Warning, we will not mince words. We believe soft men and soft advice slay no dragons. So prepare yourself like a man. This is the Dragon Slayers podcast.
Hey, Bob Hasson, thanks for joining us. My good friend, my travel buddy. Aloha.
Aloha. Thanks for having me. I'm honored to be here. Christian, Ben, Danny.
Great.
So good to gather up. We really appreciate your time. And more importantly, I just really appreciate your friendship and your leadership in all this stuff that we're doing at Dragon Slayers. That's been just something I've really enjoyed and really appreciate, and I know these guys do too. I want to just can maybe get rolling by asking you to tell us a little bit about your journey from, starting a business out of a Volkswagen, painting houses and remodels and whatever else, to most recent, I don't know what you've done since, but SoFi Stadium, you painted the place, you tiled the place, whatever, you just, that's quite a journey. Kind of fill in the gaps for me.
Well, okay. I started in business in 1977, and that was the same year that the Lord found me. So it was kind of a big year.
Yeah.
And I had just come off a major knee surgery, an ACL knee surgery that ended my sort of college water polo career. And I was rehabbing my knee, and Uncle Lou was getting his house painted, and and so I just asked this painter, "Can I help you?" And he said, "Sure, you can help me, but I'm not going to pay you." And I said, "Fine." I was going crazy anyway. And I worked for that guy for a few months and thought, "Oh, anybody can do this. I'm going to start my own business." And I had a '64 Volkswagen Bug with surf racks on it. So I put a ladder on the top and put some paint buckets in the back and went and told anybody who would listen that I was a painter. And I've repented for all those early jobs I did that I messed up. I didn't repaint them though.
So and thin no more. Yeah.
No, I thin no more. And so it began this journey of what I really liked about it was that I could see what I was doing at the end of the day. If I came into your house to paint your bathroom and I quoted you $50, I had this rocket science business philosophy. I would show up 10 minutes early, I'd charge you what I said I was going to charge you, and then I'd clean up at the end. And we still hold those principles today in our mature company, but it was something that I didn't realize that other people didn't do that. They didn't show up on time. They tried to charge more than they quoted, and they never cleaned up. And so my goal was, if I came into your house, let's say I was painting your living room, you take the drapes down, move the furniture into the middle, paint the walls, and then wait for the walls to dry and hang the drapes up and move the furniture back just where it was, and then find the vacuum somewhere in the closet and clean it. So when you came home, the only the way that you knew I was there was because the walls were a different color and you were happy. And the business, it just grew slowly but surely. I got a 1970 Datsun. Datsun was the truck before Nissan, and uh, put a ladder rack on it, and then I had a fleet. I had a '64 Volkswagen Bug and a 1970.
There it is.
Part of the fleet right there.
There it is.
I can't see the screen, but if it's funny. So at any rate, but I just held to those principles, and so I was growing in the Lord and growing, in business. And in those days, anyone who would take me, I would work for them. And I was 20, 21,
Wow. Wow.
and uh, and so I had young man's disease, and I thought, well, if the competition can do it for a certain price, I can match the competition's price. And I learned a lot of lessons the hard way about keeping keeping in tune with my price. But the ethics and the values, I think, are what separated the company as we were growing, because I really, really did want to serve the customer and do a good job.
Mm-hmm.
And I just put one foot in front of the other, and now here I am, 46 years later, scratching my head, like, why am I the oldest guy in the room, and why do I have gray hair, and why do people ask me for my opinions? It's really been quite the journey with the Lord.
For sure. For sure. Yeah. And then you go on to paint most of the visible structures in San Diego and some casinos in Las Vegas, and the airport, the LAX airport is like the Golden Gate Bridge. As soon as you get done with one end, they just start over and keep going, right? It just feels like
Well, it's so funny, Danny. We just won the next terminal. They're knocking down a terminal and building a new terminal, and that Tom Bradley International Terminal took us 7 years from start to finish to paint that, and because the construction just went forever. But here we are. They have I think a $30 billion 50-year plan for that airport.
Good Lord.
And I just, when I think about that, I think about the foresight and the planning that they have. Because I know you and I've talked over the years about 50-year goals and 100-year goals, where most people are talking about goals for 1 year or 3 year or 5 years.
Totally. Besides maybe these two guys sitting at this table, I spent more time with you than anybody that I can think of. I mean, I look for ways to spend time with you. I'm just kind of stuck with these guys.
We're just filling in the gaps till he gets back to you
in your office.
But one of the things I just love is your courage to learn and grow. I mean, since I met you, I mean, we have a picture of you and I sitting on an airplane, in on our way to Hong Kong. I think maybe it was on our way back because we were in different seats. But there we are, the two brothers that are. That was Bob upgrading us to first class. That's probably my first class, and I think I'm not sure where I got that Ferrari hat, but it was probably. I don't think it was yours, but anyway,
I think your first class trip was on the way out when
same trip though. Yes, but this was on my back, and there you are next to me. I since then we look so much younger there. I mean, you look like Kyler in this picture. I'm too bad you can't see it, but you look like Kyler, or he looks like you, or whatever. I guess you were here first. I think you get the self-improvement award of anybody I know since I met you. I mean, you have a courage and a fervor to become whole and healthy and everything that God has called you to do. And that's just since I've known you. I know the story goes back even further where there was just a crisis in the building of your business, where you just kind of were getting stripped down with pressure and economy and all that. Why don't you talk a little bit about that, and then really how it just how it was affecting your life?
Well, I have so many things I want to say on that trip. Um, this is a fun fact. Danny, you said to me, "Hey, why don't you travel with me?" And I was like, "Okay." I thought maybe we'd go to Torrance, but no, we're going to Hong Kong. And I'd
Hong
never
Kong.
really been out of the country. Um, and so we had a great trip. We were messing around, but there was this one, we were at dinner with the pastors. And Danny and I were sitting next to each other, you guys, and we were doing our normal thing that we do. And the woman pastor looked at us and said, "How long have you known each other?" And she was sure that, the answer was going to be 30 years.
Yeah, yeah.
And so the true answer was like 2 months. And I was a little embarrassed about it. And so I said, "Oh, we've known each other around a year," which was just a huge lie and an exaggeration. And Danny looked at him and said, "You know what, pastors, he's a liar."
He lies all the time. I can't take him anywhere.
You can't take him anywhere. We've only known each other 2 months. And that it was just such an amazing trip. But coming back to your question, Lauren and I have now been married for 36 years, and early in our marriage, she had um, a near term. Our baby died at 8 months pregnant, and because of how I grew up, and because I married the most amazing person in the world, the enemy just started speaking to me. That baby died because your seed is black.
Mm-hmm.
And it couldn't be Lauren because she's as close to perfect as there is. And I believed that lie. And it sent me on a spiral as I was trying to help my wife get through her grief. But I just had this thing, speaking into me. And around the same time, my business had grown, and we were experiencing some of our contractors that we worked for went bankrupt. So we weren't able to collect almost half of our annual sales. At that point in time, it was, $3 million became uncollectible. So I was under a tremendous amount of pressure. So what I did is what every good Christian should do, is I isolated myself and started drinking.
That's sarcasm right there.
And I, went to work earlier and earlier and tried to figure this problem out that was unsolvable, and tried to not be vulnerable with my wife, and it was a really rough time, which ended with me having an accident on the freeway while under the influence. But somehow the policeman who came, I had a full conversation with him. I told him what happened. Some car had run out of gas and not gotten off the freeway, and I just sideswiped him, and I spun down the freeway and was able to control the car. I was coming back from playing racquetball, so I was in sweaty clothes, but I had been drinking, and the policeman was with me for an hour and a half, and then I didn't even have my driver's license, but I know it. I told him what my driver's license was, and the tow truck driver drove me home. And a few days later, I checked myself into an outpatient rehab clinic, because all I knew about alcohol was I drink, I feel good, and then I forget. And that was 28 years ago. I've been sober for 28 years.
Boom, boom.
And it's been, it was only the Lord could do it. And my business survived that hiccup, and there's been many more. One of the things as I talk to people, young people in businesses, is people tend to think it's a straight line up, and it isn't. It's there's a there's a reason that the valley of the shadow of death is written in the Psalms, because you kind of go through that over and over and over again in your life.
So what do you tell a guy that literally believes that he is the cause of the pain and the failure, and that he's being punished for being just being alive? He's that he is unworthy and is unlovable and should brace himself for calamity, and when it comes, it's his earnings. I mean, what do you say to that guy?
Well, I know what I said to myself is that as I spun down the freeway and the police came, I remember saying to God, "Okay, God, you can finally kill me. You can take your hammer out, you can hit me on the head. I'm a failure." And in that season, He embraced me, and I was so shocked because I grew up, one of our dragons is man and God, and one of the other ones is man and men. And all two of those were wrapped up because I grew up with an angry father who was a rageaholic and abusive. And so I just thought, if I didn't perform well, then that's the way God was going to be. But instead, he and Lauren, embraced me, and I went through this whole sort of decades long metamorphosis of therapy and counseling and rest and more therapy and counseling as pretty much Lauren told me I needed to. Which anybody who's married knows what that means.
I was following the prescription of my doctor.
Right. But you say that I'm courageous. It's just, I don't want to suck. I don't want to suck at anything I do.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to suck as a husband or a Christian or a business person, or later a dad. And I realized that if I kept down the same path, I was going to. And so I've been fearless in recovery. I've been fearless in therapy. I've been fearless in business. I mean, how did our business grow so big? I wasn't ever afraid of big jobs. And I have this guy who's worked for me for almost 40 years who he's not afraid of it either. And he's our estimator, and he looks at these plans, and he is just whether it's 50 square feet or 50 million square feet, he can take it off. And so when you have confidence in the Lord first, and then how the people surround you, and we're talking here in Dragon Slayers about a band of brothers, is you have people surround you, and you allow it. You allow people to see you. You allow at least this is what I did. I allowed myself to be transparent and vulnerable to people who were safe. One of the things I did with Danny really early, because I'd never had a covenant relationship other than with my wife, I could tell, wow, God's doing something special with Danny and I. So we went out racing around, and I just dumped my bucket and told him how bad I was. Here's all my sin. Here's how I think. Here's what my past is. I want you to know all this stuff so you can leave me. And he looked at me and said, this is what he said, quote, "Wow, I knew there was a reason that you're such a deep well." And I looked at him like, you're what? You're not judging me. You're actually thinking that all this bad stuff that I told you is good, has led to who I am today. Because I'd never thought that.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just part of the healing. So I think, and Danny, you and I've talked about this forever, and Ben, you and Christian and I have talked about this too. Isolation is the killer. And when we get isolated, that's when bad things happen.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
so,
yeah.
my goal with all of my relationships is to make sure that I'm not isolated and people that I'm in relationship with aren't either. And if we all sit around and say, hey, where did Joe go? I don't know. Have you heard from him? No? Well, then we better go get him,
Yeah,
because we know as a band of brothers, we can't get isolated.
yeah, yeah. And I think that when the spirit of inadequacy and self-hatred and disqualification comes after a man, he really does believe that he's just unlovable. He just thinks that it's anybody that's trying to love him is lying to him, and he's on a course to disprove that that he's lovable. And so that I think that's exactly what happens is we shrink away into our little realm of fantasy that it's unsolvable and unresolvable, and it's just going to be a matter of time before I get flushed down the toilet. Yeah, yeah.
Ready?
Yeah, I always got stuff, but it sounded like you were getting ready to say something. But
We all got things for Bob.
Yep.
I want to get back to something you said earlier, Bob. You're the second person I've heard recently talk about this very thing, but I can't remember how you said it. But you talked about Lauren and her grief and not knowing how to work through her grief with her, and that was part of the recipe. Sounds like that sent you on the spin. But I just think about the men I talk to all the time that their wife is in grief for whatever reason it is, or in pain, and them not knowing how to work through that, and it becomes almost an attack on their identity and their capabilities. So I think my question there is, what have you since learned about handling your wife's pain, handling your wife's grief when she's struggling? What's changed in you?
Well, my life was identified. That's a great question, Ben. My life was identified by shame. And so, uh, the way that I view guilt and shame, guilt is I did something wrong and I feel guilty. Shame is I am wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And so, in the case of losing the term child, we, I knew it was my black seed, but that went through everything. If Lauren said, "Hey, you didn't do the laundry," I heard, "I'm getting a divorce."
Mm-hmm.
And and so as I began to get healed of shame and realize that, I'm not the bad seed, and realize that I am a loved child of God, which coincidentally is a lot of what my message is today, is that that's what our identity is that we are loved sons of God, no matter if we're in jail or if we're a billionaire. We performance does not dictate who we are.
Mm-hmm.
The bar is that low.
Mm-hmm.
God said it. We're his loved children. So my identity began to be healed. And as my identity began to be healed, I I had the ability then to handle Lauren's anger, her grief,
That's
and
great.
the anger that was pointed rightly so towards me. And I was able, rather than being a victim, to accept what she was saying and then decide, look, I want to change this with the help of the brothers around me and God's supernatural power, because boy, did I need it.
Mm-hmm. Beautiful.
it's good. I think the direction I want to take the conversation is just your and Danny's relationship. I mean, we're in the Dragon Slayers group, but men finding other men. I've talked to other guys, and we're trying to evangelize this idea of brotherhood. And one of the things I get back to me is like, I don't know how to find another guy friend. Like, I don't know. They're not around me. It kind of feels like I'm dating a dude, and that feels weird. And so going back to like, I didn't know it was 2 months before a Hong Kong trip, but that feels pretty short. I mean, I know Danny and you well enough by now. Like you were fast friends, but can you talk a little bit about um, as someone that as you're explaining your transformation of believing someone and letting someone in, and like you said, dumping your bucket on Danny, and Danny has this amazing response that he sees you and he loves you still. And what made you believe Danny, and what was it about Danny? And maybe Danny, you can speak too. Like, what was it about Bob? Because I get to watch your friendship close up because I'm around you guys, or at least around Danny, and it's fun. It's like when he's talking to you, Bob, it reminds me of like me talking to one of my brothers, like my actual literal brother, like the way that you joke and you rib each other and want to tell each other things. So it's just really beautiful that, there's the same type of brotherhood happening, and, it sounds love at first sight, brothers at first sight.
Cue the music.
It was the only way I can say it is supernatural, and I'm not trying to throw a God card down, but my wife Lauren got him to come to our house to speak to a group of 200 people down in our ministry room, and when he came, we didn't know each other, and so as we got to know each other, he was going to stay for one night because he didn't stay in people's houses, and so after he did the meeting, which was amazing, and he and I got a chance to get to know each other. Well, where are you going now? And I think he was going to like a Holiday Inn Express that was 30 minutes away. And I was sort of like, what are you going to do that for? Why don't you stay here and then I'll go with you? And it was just
easy.
I've never experienced anything like that except with my wife. But what we found out later is we like the same things.
Yeah.
And one of the things, and I'll finish here, and then it'll be funny to hear what Danny says, but because he's always wrong.
Yeah. Here we go.
But one of the things is that I hear the same thing is I don't have any friends. I don't have the ability to have friends, and there's no one around. And I think you have to take a risk. Danny has, he talks about what risk is, but you have to take a risk to get to know people. And he seemed like a pretty safe guy, and he is. So that is, and it blossomed so fast that it like when we were in Hong Kong, it was almost a little bit embarrassing how the short of time. And all I can say is that God just put us together for, well, we know now, more than 10 years later, for a lot of different reasons.
Yeah, I concur. I mean, it feels like you can't have very many like deep friendships. You just don't have time for them. You don't have the energy for them. So I think that to have one, it feels it has to be easy. It has to be easy, and it has to be enjoyable. And I think that was right. I think that's probably what we picked up right away was, this is fun. This is easy. I want to do this again. How do we do this again? Hey, why don't we go do this in Hong Kong? Hey, why don't we go do this in Germany? Hey, why don't we do this in Scotland? Let's go to Costa Rica. Pretty soon he is jumping into the crazy rhythm that I had going on. And I think that was another unique thing, is he had time and resources to be able to join in. And it was, how often does that happen? I don't know. And then at one point I became his doctor, and, he had a knee replacement, I think it was. One of them, I can't remember which one it was, but he's in my office, and he's got his knee there, and I got tweezers and clippers, and I'm pulling stitches out of his Or were they staples? I can't remember which were they were, what they
They were
were, but
stitches. They pulled the staples out, and then they left 4 stitches because the wound wouldn't close.
yeah. So we got them bad boys. Yep. Plucked them out of there. And, so stuff like that. Like, hey, I could do that. I stayed at a Holiday Inn Express last night. I'm a doctor.
Only covenant friendship does that right there, right?
Yeah. I just think it's so easy to be together, and it's, and it's super enjoyable.
Yeah, I heard you say, because it seems so practical, like the 3 things in there is like, one, it's got to be easy and enjoyable. I have to enjoy my time with them, and we were fast friends, and I don't have to work so hard to make this thing work. And then at the same time, I heard Bob say too, is just also this idea of like, you know what, I'm going to take a risk. This person feels safe. I liked them. They're fun. I'm going to take a risk. Because one of the things I think the pushbacks I hear from men is like, it almost feels judgmental. There's no other men out there like me.
Yeah.
It's like, whoa, this is why you need people in your life.
Yeah.
You master of your own universe, lacking feedback.
I am God's gift to friends.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally.
Well, maybe not.
So I think that's great, easy advice for guys out there who are looking for buddies.
Yeah.
Because you need them.
I at one point, Christian, Lauren and I were going through a hard time, because I'm a meathead, and Danny and I were driving around in Sacramento in his BMW. He was going to pick up his dry cleaning because he used to travel to over 200 days a year, and right as we were in the parking lot, I was talking about something about my marriage, and he just looked at me and he said, "Well, I can see how she feels because you're punishing and intimidating." And then he got out of the car to get his dry cleaning.
Left you in the car.
Sit with that.
I'll be right back.
Danny, the master of perfect timing. And I just sat there like, he's right. And I don't remember what we talked about when he got back in the car, but
you have brought this up like 10 times now.
Punished him.
But I mean, it's a funny story, but it's a marking moment, because if Danny didn't say it to me, who would?
Yeah.
And if there's been things that I've said to him that have been really hard, and if I didn't say it to him, who would?
Yeah,
and that's what brothers have to be. We have to be iron sharpening iron. We have to be willing to say the things that no one else can or will say, because they don't have it in them to say it.
Yeah. I'm gonna say, it reminds me of something that Danny told me that is so helpful, is truthing builds trust. When I truth you, I build trust with you. So I'm going to tell you something that's true, even though it's unpleasant for you, but it's because I love you. And he gets back in the car, and it builds trust in your relationship. And that's how you build soul ties and covenant relationships. And I have a friend just like that. I tell them, you know why I love you? You tell me the things that piss me off the most. I get so mad at you when you tell me these things, because you're right. You're always right. And it's unflattering about like who I am or what I'm doing, but I love you for it. And it's why I invest in this relationship. And it's why I trust you so much. Yeah. And why I love you so much as a brother. It's because you truth me.
I think there's just something to, this whole brotherhood thing is the idea of correction. Like a wise man loves correction. And a foolish man is going to defend himself against it. And we as guys, we get so defensive, we get so worked up. And so our wives, even our children, they try to say something that sounds corrective, anything that sounds corrective, and we stamp it as disrespect. How dare you disrespect me? To shut it down, to defend myself against it, to stay foolish. But a good brother is not going to put up with you. You're being defensive. You're not listening. You're being a fool. Knock it off. And you can hear that from a brother. I mean, I remember when Bob used to say, I hate people. I just hate people. I like, you don't hate people. You are a heart with legs. If you're not careful, you're going to leave a bloody mess everywhere you walk. You are so sensitive. You're so tender. I am not. I am not. I hate people. Stop saying, I don't ever want to hear you say that ever again. Don't ever say that around me ever again. He's just looking at me like, are you pissed at me? What are you doing right now? I'm just looking at him because he knows he needs to stop it. He's about the most loving, generous
Sure.
heart person, father heart person I've ever met.
Yep.
And it was I don't know, the next week or whatever, he sent out I think maybe Sherry and Lauren and Bob and I were talking about this or something, and then a few days later, he sends this email to the three of us, and he's like, wow, I just had this, and it's this really vulnerable, tender revelation thing, and it was all just like, and I said, my response was, have you been smoking pot? And he was like so covered. He felt so covered and protected, like, okay, yeah, okay, turn it into a joke. Okay, all right, okay, whew, wow. I almost felt vulnerable for a minute, but now I feel, and you're like, that right there is the manifestation of a bond of trust, to where I can actually let you see me and know that I'm accepted. We're good. I'm growing. You love me. I love you. We can do this. We can see each other. And same for me. Like when Bob tells me, about my life, I think, wow, okay. That took guts to do that. That was a risk that he just took to step into my life and to see me. Like, thank you. I value that beyond how I can communicate. I want feedback. I want to know. And so yeah, I think the idea of not turning correction into rejection is this giant thing that we have as brothers, as men, really, so our wives can speak to us, so our the people that we work with can speak to us. Like, correction cannot be rejection.
Which this sounds, and I think you're saying this just in different words, this sounds like the deeper issue to what Christian's talking about with, and Bob as well, like with men saying it's hard to find friends, it's hard to find brothers. The deeper issue probably is there's this fear that I haven't dealt with. There's this fear of being rejected by men, or actually becoming vulnerable and building that soul tie just because of what's required to get there. I mean, that's what I think I hear us all saying in different ways. And it's, every conversation that we have on here with different guys is you have to confront the fear.
Yeah.
Which is kind of the point of a dragon slayer, right?
That's one of them dragons, they keep dressing up in different ways, but I think we get afraid of the making a covenant with somebody that says, I will adjust. You speak into my life and I will adjust. That's the covenant. Like, you can say things that will change my decision.
Yeah.
I give you permission to change my mind.
Yeah.
And that would be a covenant. I mean, and Bob stepped into my financial world in Loving on Purpose, and I pretty much just yielded. Like, okay, you lead away, feed me, Seymour. I don't know what to do. I don't know what you just said. I don't know what's happening, but yeah, and here we are, stronger and faster than we've ever been. So I benefit from being corrected. Being having somebody speak into my life and change my mind.
Yeah. That's actually a good segue, that pairing of Bob helping with finances and also just referring to him as a heart with legs. because my role Loving on Purpose now is like I'm looking at finances, and I have a spreadsheet on my computer in a Google Drive file that says Bob Hasson's School of Business Finance. And I was meeting with Bob regularly going, Bob, I don't know how these spreadsheets work. I don't know how to do a cash flow projection. I don't know how to do this. Teach me. But what I want to get to in here, going back to this idea of brothers too, and Bob, I'm going to pose a question to you, is my first interaction with Bob Hasson, it was whiplash. I went to the tribe event. They were doing a conference here in Sacramento. I was coming on board potentially. I'm still kind of getting vetted out of like, who is this guy? We really don't know him. And one of my interviews, unofficial interviews, I didn't know I was part of it, was I had to go sit down with Bob. Like, hey, go talk to Bob. And I see Bob, and I love working out. The first thing I noticed, I'm like, dude, Bob's got some shoulders. Bob's got a chin. Like, Bob lifts some weights. He's done some stuff. So he's an intimidating figure. So I'm sitting with him, and I'm not a small guy. So I'm sitting with him going, okay. And Bob leaned over, and he has a presence about him. Like, I really was such a, I don't know. And he's asking me these questions, and they feel aggressive. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I had to like kind of snap, like, okay, I gotta have some answers here. He was asking me questions about who I was as a person. It had zero to do with my ability as any kind of leader, as any kind of a business developer, as any kind of marketer. He'd ask me questions about how I think about my wife, what I do with my kids, what my goals for my kids were. And luckily I had great answers because that's something I cared about. But he heard what he needed to hear. And then it's like whatever that, the front he put on, and then I got the heart with legs, and he just totally relaxed. And I'm like, wait, who's this other guy I'm talking to now? Because now he became my biggest advocate, my best friend. Like, hey, I'm going to help you, brother, do all this stuff. And here's the question in there, Bob. One of the things I wanted to get to too is, as I was talking to you, you did something for me, and I don't think I've ever told you specifically about it. There was a moment, and I've later since learned why that was so impactful for me. Is I learned that when I get scared, I'm a fight, flight, freeze. I'm a fight guy. So when I get scared, I start attacking things, and I'll start saying things confidently that I might not have don't actually feel like I have the way to back it up. And so when I was talking to you about my abilities and what I was going to do at Loving on Purpose, I started railing off, I'm going to do this, and I'm going to do that, and I'm going to do this. Really, I look back as coming from a place of fear, coming from a place of, like, I hope I can do this. But you said this same thing that disarmed the whole situation and like snapped me to. And what you said is, I know. And I was like, what? You're like, I know you're going to do that. And you are going to do a great job with that. I've seen guys like you. I know exactly where you're headed, and I'm going to help you. And it was such a moment, because it was like, this dude believes in me. I don't even know him. Yeah. Like,
I thought he didn't like me.
I thought he didn't like me. Now he believes in me. And like, you have been that guy who's championed me so much here. So as a brother, as a father figure, as someone, when you see young men who are walking the path that from VW to SoFi Stadium, if there's a man out there who's on the grind, who's trying to figure his way up, but maybe feels a little bit lost or unseen or unfathered or unrecognized, what would you say to that? What would you say to that young man or that guy that's just trying to figure it out and has a great trajectory, but has a lot to learn?
Well, if after I questioned them like this, they were still standing and they were baffling me with bullshit like you were, then I would say something like, you can do it. I know you can. And one of the things I think we as men need is brothers to give each other courage. And all you needed, I could tell instantly how God had gifted you, was courage. And I met Ben a long time ago, and I remember having these deep conversations, and all he needed was courage. Just, you know what? I see you, Ben, and I see these things in you, and this is where God's taking you. And look where God's taken him through college. Um, he's got, I don't know, what are you, 25, Ben, and you have like a 20-year-old girl daughter now? I mean,
26.
yeah. And you have this family, and
Yeah.
by the time you're 80, you're going to be married 60 years,
It's
62
true.
years.
Yeah.
But there were all these things coming to a new country. And so I just think if we're curious about each other,
That's good.
and if we take the time to see each other the way God sees us and speak that into people, I mean, it's amazing. And I think that young people and old people need the same thing. They need courage. And no matter where we are in the journey, Danny's in his 60s now, and he's got this whole new journey coming in front of him that is different from the last over 40 years of his ministry. And so we just need to take the time to see that in each other and call out the gold, as we say sometimes. But we all need courage. I need courage. The three of you guys need courage. We all need courage. And we need to be transparent enough and vulnerable enough to give it. Like, what does it matter if I give you courage? And I want you to stand on my shoulders, and I want you to be more successful than me, because I was able to stand on other people's shoulders, and ultimately God put his favor and destiny on me. And so I want to give that away. And one of the things we were talking earlier about, people not being able to find friends. Well, in business, you show up and people are like, well, how many employees do you have? How much annual sales? Danny and I have a friend who will all ask all these financial questions. How much are you worth? How much do you get asked all these questions? And so what they're trying to do is peacock. They just want to feel better about themselves, that your business is smaller than theirs, or fill in the blank. And so what I started doing about 10 years ago was, people would say, how many employees do you have? And I would say, do you know how many gallons of water a average pool holds? No, 15,000 gallons. An average pool has 15,000 gallons. So this year, we're going to fill up 4 pools of paint. And then I would just keep talking to them, and you could see like, well, I don't know what that means. I'm like, well, if I came to paint your house, I'd use 25 gallons. And then people can start to see a scope. But what I hope I'm a humble person, and I don't talk about um, these metrics, except that, hey, my company's mature. It's been around for 45 years. Hey, Lauren and I have been married for 36 years. These are the things that are important to me. The metrics aren't. And one of the things that I think, men, not only do they have a hard time finding friends, but they have a hard time connecting with people on normal levels, because the fear is inside of them that somebody else might be doing better.
Competition.
And we want, as believers, we
good.
want people to do better.
Mm-hmm.
And he's dedicated his whole life to people doing better. I have too, and you guys are on the way to dedicating your lives to encourage people to do better. And so it would just be so counterproductive if we had jealousy about people's performance and what God was doing through them.
Yeah, and that's how you know you got a good friend, is they are rejoicing in your victory.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
They're like, that's amazing. That of course that's what's happening in your life. Look who you are. That is got to be there. And We haven't really talked about Lauren as much as we should have, but I want to just circle back with the value of a supportive wife. Bob, what do you have to say there? I mean, obviously, you go through what you shared about earlier, and Lauren's still there, and she's a powerful girl. You're a powerful guy, so you guys have some powerful disconnections. When you don't mess around. When you disconnect, you just like, hey, you know what we should do? We should go all the way. So there is this is not patty cake junction here. This is like, we seriously got to work stuff out, and yet, I think you'd say you have one of the most supportive wives in the world.
I do. We're both Enneagram 8s. We're both disc Ds.
Yeah.
So you're right. When we get sideways, we get sideways. And but back into that time when I did the Christian thing and I isolated and drank, she I walked in after work and she was in the kitchen and she just said, "What is going on, honey?"
Mhm.
And so I said, I was so afraid to say this, and it had been like 30 or 45 days of isolation. And I just said, these companies that we're working for have gone bankrupt. I can't collect the money. I've been putting my painting clothes on in the morning and painting till noon, and then putting my tie on and going into the office in the afternoon, and I don't know what to do. And she said, "You know what to do." I said, "I do." And she said, "Yeah." And she said, "Tell me what you're going to do." And I did. I don't know how she knew this. I had this idea because my material suppliers, in order to get paint, my bonding company, in order to get jobs, my insurance company, in order to keep paying workers' compensation, I owed them lots of money. And so before we were late on any payments, I called each one of those vendors, partners in, and I said, "I see a problem happening in the future, and I'm not going to be able to pay you. So what I want to do is package up this debt," which was a total of about $500,000 at the time. "I want to package up this debt and I want to start making payments to you. And then on a going forward basis, I want to be able to, I think I can make this work." And the first guy in was this paint supplier, and he said, "So are you telling me you called me in here to tell me about a problem before the problem happened?" And I said, "Yes." He said, "I've been in business 40 years. And nobody's ever done that. You write whatever you want to do, I'll sign it." And all four of these partners did the same thing. And it took me 5 years to pay off that debt. But it allowed me to stay in business. And back to the conversation with Lauren, I told her, "This is what I want to do." And she said, "That's a great idea." And then she looked at me and she said, "Why would God have brought us this far to fail? He's not going to let us fail." And she said, "I thought we were having problems with our marriage,
Mhm.
and don't ever isolate again." Which, I do have the tendency to do it, but over all the years, I've really shortened the time. She's the most supportive person, and I couldn't have done any of this. About 20 years ago, we got sued to be in the union, and Lauren and I have this. We don't make any big decisions without us being on the same page. And I realized early that our lawyers told us it was going to cost $2 million to fight the litigation. It was a class action suit, and we were going to lose. And so I came to her and said, "We need to sign this union agreement." She said, I don't have a piece about it." I was like, okay. And so for 8 months, I waited. All of our jobs had big rats, smoking cigars, picket lines. It was bad. All of our customers were calling us saying, you need to get rid of these pickets. And I was like, I know. And so I would come home and say, yeah, we got a rat on this job and we have these problems. And she didn't have a piece about it, but she had a group of intercessors meeting with her, and she'd asked them what they thought. And this was so funny. I think there was 8 women. The first woman said, I'm hearing from the Lord that you need to be in union with your husband. And Lauren's this firecracker. She's like, oh, I can't believe that woman's such a woodie. I mean, like, she doesn't know what she's talking about. And all around this group of intercessors, they basically said some variation of the same thing.
Mm.
And so she came to me and said, do you really think we need to union? I said, yeah, and she said, okay. And, she years later, she tells that story about how powerful it was that I waited, and honored our agreement to make big decisions together. And to me, uh, it was like, well, that was our agreement, and that's what I do, is honor agreements. And I think in Christianity, one of the things that's lacking, we teach great Bible study, we have great worship, we do all this stuff, but there's this character piece that I think, our brothers need to begin to understand, is that our yes is yes, our no is no, and that we need to have the character of doing what we say we're going to do, and and building a band of brothers, becoming fathers and grandfathers, and passing that down is so, so important.
Totally. For sure. Well, Bobby, thank you. You're awesome.
So good.
I mean, you are a man of your word. You are a man of character, and man, I greatly respect and appreciate. And thanks for throwing your strength into all of this and all the people around you. I mean, this is just a testimony of what it means to be a godly man, and you can look in the face of your wife and see that you're doing a good job. So
We just it was Valentine's Day a couple days ago, which is my favorite holiday, and so Lauren and I try to get away and do something, uh, together. And I pulled up my phone and typed in February the 14th and found like 10 years of where we were on Valentine's, and it was really cool.
yeah,
And yeah, I the Lord saved me all those years ago, but having a supportive wife and spending the effort to be vulnerable and transparent and be willing to shift and adjust and change was so worth it. I think it's really, really hard for a lot of guys to take the risk in friendships and in their marriages, but it's worth it because God's faithful.
totally. Thanks, man. I really appreciate your time on here, and you guys got anything else?
Yeah, I it's been said, Bob, already, but I think just the one of the things that I love watching with different men that I've talked to on this podcast is there's keys and principles and values from each of them that just feel so powerful. I think the way that Danny said it was a heart with legs. I think men listening today, if you can figure out a way to become a heart with legs, what does it look like to become the greatest encourager just in your environment? Danny said this as well, but you really are one of the best examples I've ever been around of someone who just creates this fatherly experience with the strong comment to the loving experience. So I think teaching men how to practice that thing is just so important. So I so appreciate it. It's such a standard to put out there for men to follow. So thanks, Bob.
Ben, it's interesting. I wasn't taught that.
Right.
And I think that if there's any success in my life, is that of being a good husband and a great father. It is that God did that for me. And
So good.
I basically just figured out what's the opposite of what my experience was, and I'll do that.
Yeah.
And I've got 4 older kids, I've got 2 boys and 2 girls, and I'm friends with them all now. And it is so amazing. And I think it's worth the effort.
Beautiful. Yeah.
Amen.
Love it.
Awesome.
Love it.
Thank you guys. So happy
Ben.
to be with you all.
Yep. Thanks, Bob. It's great to have you. Bye-bye.
See you, Bob.
See you guys.